Alright, so I promised you I'd talk about my book, so here we go. Over the course of the next few videos, I plan on discussing the various elements of my story, including the characters, the main plot, the sort of underlying conflicts, as well as a lot of what inspired me to write certain parts of the story. But today I would like to discuss the settings and the overall theme of my work, so you have proper context as to what it is, like the world that we're working with. My story takes place in a massive city-state known as the City of Purgatory. I chose the City of Purgatory as its name because the underlying theme is that no matter who the character is in the story, no matter how diverse and how wildly different each individual character is, everybody is supposed to just be a person. Everybody is supposed to be living together under one common law, under one common community, treated as an equal, even though it is quite clear that nobody in this story is truly equal to another. This city has angels, this city has demons, this city has robots, aliens, mermaids, elves, dwarves, ogres, goblins. It has griffins and dragons and unicorns. It has ghosts, ghouls, goblins, and there's all sorts of human type characters like knights in shining armor. You've got hunters out in the forest. You've got cowboys out in the desert, fishermen, astronauts, and all of these different people are supposed to be treated as equal. I wanted to do this as a reflection of my world, of America, or I guess the now globalized planet Earth, where we have so many different people from different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different cultures, who speak different languages and have different customs, but we're all still human, and we should be treating ourselves as equals, even though we clearly don't. So what does it look like when so many different people try to live together under a common law? Well, you get one of the main conflicts of my story, which I'll talk about later. Honestly, when I first started writing this book, I didn't have a plot idea in mind. I just wanted to have the most diverse cast of characters I could imagine, so that there would be no shortage of plot ideas. Mostly so that I could write a series. Story 1 is going to have a robot fighting a zombie. Story 2 is going to have the mermaids arguing with the forest creatures or something. And I've already told y'all that I wasn't very focused on the work when I started writing this book. But since I picked it back up, I realized that this looks a lot like modern day America, where you have all these different groups who have their own way of life, and they're just arguing with each other, even though you can simply talk out your issues and come to a conclusion together about what your problems are. No, people don't want to do that. People just want to fight each other over nonsense. But in my work, the people are drastically exaggerated in their appearance, as well as in their lifestyle and in their culture. Because they can't just live together and interchange with each other. The underwater creatures, for example, like the mermaids, the fish people, and so on, have to live underwater. But the machines can't just live underwater because they're electronic. So there can be a conflict there. As well as the fact that there are actual zombies in my work. Rotting corpse people who walk around, just dripping flesh. They are clearly not going to be allowed in certain places because they stink and they are falling apart, quite literally. So I really wanted to explore just how different people can be before living together was an impossibility. That's the main theme of my work. The setting has all sorts of different genre elements from different stories kind of packed together into the city. And I divided up the city into neighborhoods based on genre. For example, I have the Hallowed District, which is where all the undead live. It's very gothic horror. You've got rundown mansions, you've got graveyards, there's this eerie, foggy mist that's just surrounding everything. But this is where the undead live. This is where they congregate because this has the best circumstances for them as undead creatures. You've got the Skyline District, which is literal ivory towers on top of a mountain. This is more like the downtown district of the city, where the angels and the harpies and other such flying individuals live. It's also where you've got banks, it's also where you've got the lawyers, you've got politicians who work there. So you can imagine that it's very Wall Street-esque in its feel. On the opposite end of that spectrum, you've got the Sunless District. This is the most poor neighborhood because it's literally tunnels underground. This is where you've got people who are made out of mushrooms. This is where you've got the demons. This is where you've got subterranean characters. These are the poorest of the poor, who are often blue-collar workers. They're factory workers, low wage, minimum wage, no wage type of characters who are usually ill-educated. They're prone to crime and violence, but I don't really see them as bad people. Again, everybody is just a person in this story. It's just, this is the circumstance that they find themselves in. As well as the difference between, say, the Archaic District, which is the fantasy area, where you've got castles, you've got moats and windmills, and everything is magical, because it's more like the Historic District, where people don't want to give up a traditional way of life. They reject modern conveniences like technologies, and instead supplement everything with magic. You know, they can still communicate long distances, but they use either some sort of flying animal or they use magic to do so. They don't have electronic heaters in their homes. They have fireplaces. They use torches. They use swords and shields to defend themselves, and so on. Whereas on the opposite end of that spectrum, you have the technologically advanced mechanical district, which is much like an urban sprawl. This is where all the machines live. This is like the pinnacle of technological advancement that I see reflected in modern day America. You know, very Silicon Valley-esque. I'm not going to say Silicon Valley. That's a bit of an that's not very accurate. Think of the most sort of progressive region of any city, and that's the mechanical district. There's neon lights everywhere. The latest and greatest, hottest fad is sold there. All the high-tech mumbo-jumbo. Basically just turn the Apple store into an entire neighborhood, and that's what you've got is the mechanical district. You've got automobiles, you've got flat-screen televisions, you've got this immense electric grid. It's the most sort of futuristic, progressive region of this world. Then, of course, you have the differences between the Botanical District and the Orbital District. The Botanical District is this sort of forest area where I have a lot of animalistic characters, mostly fantasy creatures like griffins and dragons and unicorns, who live in this natural world. You know, they live amongst these trees and they live with talking plants and talking mushrooms, and it's very organic in its feel. Whereas the Orbital District is actually a space station. The space station is where the aliens live. This is where you would imagine the most foreign, sort of like new immigrants coming into a country or a city. That's where you have the Orbital District. These aliens don't really interact with everyone else in the city at all. They stay confined to their little bubble high up above them out in space in a geostationary station. They have their own language, they have their own cultural customs, and they don't mix with anybody else at all. Very isolated. And it's very, very foreign is the best way I can explain it, because they don't share anything with anyone else, and they don't accept anything from anyone else. So just imagine a community that came from a foreign country that settled in the middle of your city. But instead of embracing what your city has to offer and what your culture has to offer, they just kind of stay within themselves. Whatever they came from Whatever they brought with them from their country, they just kind of brought and they kept with them. And that's how I imagine the City of Purgatory. All of these different people who have different needs, who have different expectations of the quality of their life, who have different ideas of what a good life is supposed to be, they're all just trying to live together. And one of the more notable differences is going to be such as the angels and the demons, per se. Because you would think that demons are evil, angels are good. Well, no, they're both just people. They have their own lifestyles and they have their own needs and their own wants. But in this world, they're just people. And I really, really want to reflect on that in this book.